We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. Davidson County Sheriff Daron Hall is with us. We're going to take some of the phone calls, 737-7587. With regard to, interesting, we were talking about Joseph Daniels and some of the comments that the viewers have that have followed this and obviously are very mad at what happened to the little boy, and many of them rushed to judgment. You know, he confessed, recanted. Did he do it? And we'll see if it goes to trial. But a lot of them, and I'm wondering, have a preconceived notion that inmates who commit crimes against children of this nature get behind bars, be it in jail or prison, and that then they're targeted by other inmates for certain crimes and that they are gang raped on a daily basis. And I'm like, look, I guess there may be some kind of hierarchy of crimes, but it's just as intriguing to me that some double murderer in there is somehow in a hierarchy above a child rapist, which both is horrible. But frankly, if I have to pick one worse than the other, it's the double murderer. And yet they're the ones going after the child rapist, which, not to minimize child rape, but the child's still alive in one case or another. Now, in this case, this is a child that was murdered, and that's horrible. Is he going to be targeted by other inmates? Does that happen as much as people think it does, or is that the movies?
Yeah, I mean, that's a myth that I got in this 30 years ago. It was more common then, and I'm just saying a lot more common. Not the rape necessarily.
Yeah, but in this case, Joseph Daniels is accused of murdering his son, and that's significantly worse, I think, because someone's dead. But a child, and helpless, and so the other inmates say, look, well, I killed an adult, but you killed a child, we're going to take you out.
I mean, I remember this vividly. I mean, that or very elderly people who are vulnerable.
Helpless.
If you took advantage, and it's bizarre, but there was more of a code behind bars years and years ago that was kind of this, you know, if you had, you know, victimized some very elderly person or a very young person, you know, the inmates watched the news, they understood what was going on, and I remember, you know, your nickname that they would label you with may have something to do with your charge, and that kind of labeled you. And then there were people who, you know, back in the day I would see it more as physical violence. The sexual misconduct, I think, has always been overplayed in the media and the world of movies. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure that's real in some cases. But about 10 years ago, the federal government took an effort. It's called PREA, Prison Rape Elimination Act. It's a very exhaustive review of Prison Rape Elimination Act. And what they do is every sexual assault, sexual misconduct allegation is basically reported by every jail in America. And all of those reports, believe it or not, are kind of filtered through and eventually reviewed, even at the federal level. You have to be audited by this. It's a huge effort. And what happens is those jails or prisons in the country that have the most reported sexual misconduct of any sort are sent to D.C., Washington, I believe one time a year, and they have to report out on why, what's going on, and what are you doing about it. I mean, it's a huge... So yeah, they'll flag you. Have you had to deal with some of this in the years? Well, sure. I mean, the allegation of that is...
Now, it's one thing between allegation and reality, but I mean, if there's an allegation, it has to be investigated, I suppose.
Yeah, and let's be clear. We're talking about sexual misconduct of any kind, inmate to inmate, staff to inmate. Okay. You know, so it's got all sorts of ramifications. And you know, back, gosh, 20 years ago, we went to the legislature. The sheriff, I was the chief deputy at the time, went to the legislature and had the law passed to where I used to say officers who had sexual contact with inmates, it was a felony, I believe, and so what we did was change the law that says anybody who works in a system and in corrections of any position and has any sort of sexual contact with an inmate, it would then be a felony charge. And so the prosecution of that, and we have pursued that over the years when we've had those allegations. I mean, you can't even have, you know, you shouldn't have consensual relationships. That's not acceptable. It's a felony.
You see that oftentimes leading to escape efforts, because then they fall in love, and then the staffer finds a way to sneak a key into them.
That's right.
Let's take a few phone calls. We got Paul on line 1. Good morning, Paul.
Morning, Nick.
Hey, Paul. What's on your mind, my friend?
Hey, good morning to you and good morning to good Sheriff. I hope y'all had a good Thanksgiving.
Good morning, Paul.
I work at Trousdale Turner, Sheriff, in Hartsville.
All right.
And I've been out there for about 3 years. I'm sergeant out there, and I'm fixing to transfer back to Metro, my old stomping grounds, and I'm going to finish my career up there. That's where I've started back here, and I understand you got a facility out there now.
That's exactly right. Well, hey, I got all kinds of things to say. By the way, the Turner facility was named after my mentor. Jimmy Turner was a fantastic man. Fantastic man. And So glad to hear you coming back to Metro. Though we need a lot of good folks, and especially probably a little better than some of the days at Trousdale.
Oh, Lord, yeah. I could go into Trousdale. I could take a whole show up with Trousdale, but we're trying to get it better up there, the administration and everything. But Jimmy Turner was my first warden too, Sheriff, and he was such a fine fella, I'll tell you that. But Nick, what I want to tell you was that fella you got sitting next to you. And every time I tried to tell this, he is one of the absolute best at what he does in the entire country. Now, Nick, I've known a lot of sheriffs in my time. I'm in Williamson County, and I've known them, Lord, from Faith Thomas to all of them in Williamson County, Fleming Williams. And I will put that man up right there that you got, Nick, up against anybody in the country of his professionalism and ethics and how he conducts himself. I always wish that he would cross over and maybe run for senator or congressman or something. He'd get my vote. Now, you know, Nick, and I'm a registered Democrat, but if he ran for Republican, he'd get a crossover vote from me. And I'll tell you what, he's a fine fella. And thank y'all, and God bless you.
Thank you, Paul.
For your call.
Wow, that's
Appreciate
great.
it.
And nice to hear from Paul. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's nice of him to say that. Well, I mean, in terms of your involvement at a national level, I mean, you were involved with the Sheriff's Association, right, as president for a period of time, correct?
It's interesting you bring that up. So what happens is you're elected by the body of sheriffs in the National Sheriff Association, and so I was elected about 6 years ago to go into these chairs, and you bump up a chair every year. So when the president rolls off, you bump up each. So my year to be the president was next June. Okay. So I was scheduled to be sworn in next June in Tampa, Florida. And so you're gearing up for all that, and you're waiting on all that, and you're learning each year a little bit more. And so my summer of this coming summer, to get ready for next year, I would be the first vice president. I'd be sitting with the guy who is the president of the National Sheriff Association and go all year with him to watch and learn. He was beaten a month ago, so he's kicked off of the board, and so now I go in June of this year to be the president of the National Sheriff Association. So
you'll go in. You've built up to this point, but you're not going to have the benefit of that full year with. Is that right? Congratulations, though.
I mean, I don't know.
Well, you'll do great. I mean, just so folks know, I'm trying to get a handle on this. Exactly how many sheriffs are there in the country?
Over 3,000. Over
3,000 sheriffs.
3,000.
And so, in that capacity, is it mostly I guess it's administrative, but as president of the Sheriff's Association on the national level, what will you be doing? Yeah,
you know, for a couple little things. It's kind of humbling to me, but we've never had one from Tennessee in all the years of this thing. And I've always thought that would be an interesting and a neat opportunity. And back 6 years ago, you have to understand when you kind of get in the interest level of doing this, you look 6 years out, you have to run for re-election yourself, you have a lot going on back home, and you want the timing to work out. Given all of our facilities that we're trying to open up and do all that, my year to do all that would be next year, be perfect. Get all this done this year.
Right. Now.
So everything, and here it is, we're counting up election votes on the night of around here in the state, and all the Senate races and everything else. And so literally, I wasn't paying a lot of attention. He's a friend of mine in Minneapolis. He's a sheriff in Minneapolis.
He was next up.
And we've talked several times, and so I'm in Washington, D.C. the day after election on some other business, and I was looking on my phone, and a lady sitting next to me was from Minneapolis. She goes, "Our sheriff got beat last night." I said, "What?" So I start looking, sure enough, so he is out. So my whole life is going to flip upside down a little bit. This June, and so
and it's a one-year term.
It's a one-year term, and really, I mean, I hate to say this, but it is administrative in a lot of ways. You are leading the organization. It's a big honor. I'm really thrilled to be able to say that, but the political winds are so powerful in the world of this. Powerful as in it gets blown back and forth, whether it's immigration or whether it's drugs or whether it's opioid or mental health. And so I'm interested in contributing to that, but I'm not interested in some of the hyper political parts of it. And it's not always been this way. When I was really getting in, it wasn't this way. And so I think I've said this on here before, but maybe 3 years ago, I was on the executive committee at the top level of the deal, and we were asked to come over to the White House soon after President Trump was in to basically endorse some of the policies that he was rolling out, and I just made a decision to not go do that as a member of that, because we weren't sharing what our sheriff's issues were in our communities to help, kind of steer the country. We were asked to come and endorse a policy that was rolling out. Right, and I just, and I'm not trying to, resist the president. I just don't think that was my role, and nor would it be my role as the president. I think our role of the association, it is to go represent the Sheriff's Association, but I don't like being used by any party or anything.
Right,
I'm not picking a side.
It's whoever in that capacity was president, you would have been like, I don't want to do this unless...
Right. I feel the same way about. I think you know this about me. I'm a pretty independent person around here. I've had trouble with certain mayors trying to dictate things. I didn't like that. They're very liberal type of people. Obviously, the Trump situation was not so liberal, and I wasn't comfortable with being kind of used in those ways. And I don't think my job as the sheriff of Nashville is to go do. For example, one of the policies they wanted the endorsement of was the pipeline going through North Dakota. Well, I have no interest, no knowledge, no expertise, nothing to do. And so for me to stand up there and endorse that would have been disingenuous at best. And I just, so I will serve my role. I want to be part. I'm not anti. The President Trump just passed a bill and pushed a bill through called the First Step Act, which I totally support. It's a really good idea about re-entry and helping people come out of the prisons. It's a very, very innovative and, to be honest, very almost liberal policy. Where it came from was Jared Kushner. His son-in-law's dad was in prison, and Jared Kushner has a passion for helping people who are being, re-entering society. I think it's fantastic. It's against a lot of the people who support President Trump, but he pushed the bill. I'm a big fan of it.
So it's case by case with what you think is best for your jail and the people that you serve.
Right, and I'm honored to get to do it, but it'll be and it upset my whole schedule.
It's not like you don't have a lot going on. Well, congrats on that. Listen, we got to take a break. We'll come back. We'll take more calls right after this.